Welcome everybody. This is Rev Games. I figured it would be a good time with the way the meta is developing to do a summer 2023 GOAT format deck tier list. This is really just going to be the power level of the deck. I know there's something to be said about how much deck or skill the deck takes to play, and I'll make a few comments on that, but it kind of is a blend on how good the deck is as a standalone, and then also the skill necessary to pilot that deck. I think, while we're at it, I'm going to try to order these within the tiers. Um, and, on a side note, I do have ad block on, so before you gripe about that, the site is just infested with ads everywhere. So, yeah. Some of these thumbnails, I didn't make this, by the way, I just pulled it off of tiermaker.com, and some of these thumbnails are a little off, but I think you should be able to pretty much get the idea of what deck we're referencing with this. Like here, it's like Earth aggro with Gaia power. I mean, I don't know. Like Gaia power plus Gigantes seems like some anti-synergy, but I'm not above trying that. I mean, you beat over Warrior, but I just don't like. It's not like you're running terraformings in some other respect. So like, yeah, I don't know. It just seems bad. But we'll get to the commentary here in a second. The other thing is like this tier maker has like a bunch of different builds. Like I'm not gonna go like really into anything that's off meta. Like this should be stuff that you're seeing somewhat frequently on ladder or in tournament top lists. If there's something I miss and you want to complain about it, be my guest. But like there's just like a million things in here that just like they don't make any sense. So we're gonna stick with the most common prevalent stuff and layer in some commentary with that. So first is Panda Burn. So Panda Burn, I think solidly goes into A tier. I think you'd have a really hard argument otherwise. This deck creeps in and out of the meta somewhat frequently, depending on sideboards. Um, I don't think Panda Burn ever could get into S tier, and then unless there's some just like ridiculous genius deck innovation that nobody saw coming for the last decade and a half or however long it's been. Reason being is just way too easy to side against. Um, it also isn't able to full Trinity. Um, Decks that can either not be hurt by Trinity as much, for instance, Chaos Turbo, like they don't care as much about getting duoed as other decks, or use 3 Trinity pieces are always going to be better. This can use really 2 Trinity pieces, and it gets hurt even more by Trinity than your average deck. Like getting duoed um, as Panda is very, very bad. All right, next is Monarchs. This I don't have these pre-planned, but like I'm thinking B or C. There was that Monarch deck with Stein out some time ago, and I think that's probably a step in the right direction. At this point in the meta, I just have no idea how you're ever gonna win by just like trying to Monarch people down. The other like just do like a Congo line of Monarchs, like that's just not gonna work. Um, the other thing I think, and this is maybe more a function of the thumbnail, is I think you need like an alternate win con like with Stein, which is really good. I think the other avenue to go is maybe like a more Soul Exchange heavy list because um, there's a lot of setting going on. I mean, of course, Soul Exchange plus Stein probably wouldn't fit in the same list, but I really do think Soul Exchanges are a really underrated card. Like if you're going to try to play a grindy game, the difficult part about that is like you basically have to at that point summon um, like either the Stalos just because there's not going to be like another monster on board, so you can't summon Zaborg, or you're going to like try to summon Mobius maybe, but like I don't know. Like it just like in a format without something like Caius or Ryza, the utility of each of the monarchs is just a lot lower. Like you have to have the right monarch at the right time which is difficult um, to make your pushes. Whereas like with something like Chaos, um, you can let it sit in your grave for a while and then you can activate it, and like a Monarch will never just outright win you the game. A BLS can, and then also just banishing with a lot of the stuff that floats nowadays is very important. So like unless there are players that have two monsters on board somewhat frequently, Zaborg just kind of becomes bad and a dead card. And I think you know good players are going to know how to play around that, as well as Mobius and whatever it might be. So I'm having a tough time with this one. I don't want to spend too much time on each of these, but um, I'm gonna I'm gonna put it in C for now and see what else shakes out. This is Empty Jar. I think this is a D tier deck, at least from a competitive level, as well as just a have fun level. Um, I just don't think it's good. I just really don't. I don't really think there's much else to be said about it. Bazoo Return. I think this is solidly C tier. I don't know what Skull Lair is doing in there, but this is way too slow for the current metagame and how things have developed over time. This was a really cool deck back in the day, and that goes for a lot of these decks. They were really cool decks back in the day. Same goes with like Soul Control and Monarchs and stuff like that, but I just don't think you are ever going to have time to set up a graveyard big enough where Bazoo is actually remotely good, especially like butting up against stuff that can just wall it to some degree. You like get over one spy, and then you have no graveyard, and then like you have return from the different dimension, and like what's that gonna do if you're walled already? So it's just too slow. Like by the time you get going with this deck, I think you're just probably dead already. Um, it's again one of those decks like resolving a return from the different dimension is one of the best feelings in this game. You're just like ha, like I gotcha, but like I just don't think it's fast enough. Maybe there's some way to make it faster. I don't know, like combining some sort of like crazy mill engine. I don't know. There's not really like enough. Well, there's not really any mill in Goat, so I just don't think they could work. Um, Rescue Cat. This is I think a good deck. Um, I think I'm gonna put it at the top of B just because I don't have extensive play experience with this, but I think this deck could very easily take tournaments just based on how explosive it is and how crazy it is that Last Will is at 3. You have Stein in this format. You've got like stuff like Heavy Storm. You don't have to worry about Starlight Roads like in Edison. You have 3 Trunades. Like, I'm actually going to move this up to A. Like, I think this is a very slept on deck right now. Um, the one issue with it is that you do you do have to worry about things like Threatening Roar. Threatening Roar definitely boinks you, and Threatening Roar is already a card that's seeing a considerable amount of side play. And Threatening Roar is, even decent enough against like something like this. It's good against Reasoning Gate Turbo, and it's good against this. And like in a pinch, depending on what type of deck you play, you can even have it inverse Warrior. So, or like Steingate, as opposed to Reasoning Gate. So like or Earth Aggro. Like it really depends on what your build is, but Threatening Roar is just a common enough card, and it's a good enough counter to these decks that it really holds them back. Speaking of Threatening Roar holdbacks, um, Reasoning Gate. I think this is at the top of A. Gotta move this. Oh, come on. This deck's really good. I just think the deck is, quite frankly, too hard to play for most people. I think if there were a cohort of really good players, like the usual Chaos Turbo tryhards that just like you just tied their hands behind their back and you're like, hey, go perfect Reasoning Gate and get really good with it. I think we would have a shot to see this so much more frequently. I just think it's too hard for a lot of those guys, to be quite frank. Um, you know, no disrespect to like the top players in GOAT format, but the best deck, as we'll see shortly, is very, very forgiving. It's just like you can have an off day, like be hungover, and like as long as you're like a pretty above average player, you can take tournaments quite easily. It's just too good of a deck. But like this is just such a high skill ceiling deck because you have to make so many judgment calls on like when to go off. And one misplay with this deck is more than any deck that I've played maybe in Yu-Gi-Oh ever. If you make one misplay with this, like you're probably toast. Um, just because the turns are so limited. Like so the number of plays you make are limited too. And I've heard this argument before in some other card games I play, but like aggro decks in a sense can take more skill and be more punishing because if you're trying to end the game within like I guess let's just like talk about like Earth Aggro. Like Earth Aggro, if you're trying to end the game like sub 6 turns, which I think is like the sweet spot for Earth Aggro, like one misplay has a higher relative weight in that game for you than if you're grinding out, you know, 15 turns like with Chaos Turbo or something like that. So um, I think there's something to be said with that. And like Reasoning Gate, like the sweet spots like that 2 to 3 turn range. Um, it's rare you're going to get a hand good enough to go off on turn one. It's nice when that happens and it sucks for your opponent, and that's why people hate this deck. But like turn 2 to 3, like by turn two, you're probably your opponent's going to try to stick something or start like hitting your face so that you can get so they can like reduce the number of dimension fusions you can resolve, or conversely, depending on their hand, they're going to start walling you, and it's just going to be pretty difficult for you to get past a wall with this deck if it's too big of a wall and it's set, especially with a lot of players not using Metamorphosis in these decks now, so they can't like use their Demock to get Gatling and then clear that and then, you know, swing face. So this is just a very, very punishing deck. And I think it was Goat Duels or ACP, whatever you want to call them, was saying that a lot of this deck is based on statistics and probabilities of like what you're going to hit and what you're going to mill. And I just don't think, and then like what your subsequent extender would be, and like how that combo is going to play it out. Because like the combos in this deck are not defined at all. Like there are just like one-off weird ass combos that just come out and just are quite frankly amazing. They're just so one-off, and like you're just never going to see them again, and you have to see those lines and get in a lot of reps with a deck like this. So it's tough. It's not like a modern Yu-Gi-Oh like combo deck where like everything's basically pre-built by Konami and it's like pretty well defined, and like you can kind of memorize the combos by like reading a guide or two. Like there's no guide on a deck like this. You just have to feel it out in the game. So I think this has potential. It's a frustrating deck because there are going to be decks, game or hands, games and matches where you just brick and you get beaten. And I think a lot of good players don't like that. Like they favor consistency over maybe the ability to actually win. But I think higher variance strategies like this do allow you to probably win more tournaments, um, on average than maybe, you know, something completely different. But not going to go too deep into that. And really the corollary to this is Steingate. I don't think this is good or as good. I think it's a B tier deck. I mean, you can cheese some wins with a deck like this, but I just think this is the better deck. Um, Getting put below 5,000 is just too easy. This deck can win over multiple turns in a worst case scenario. This deck, I guess it can, but it's very few and far between, so it's just a lot less flexible. Um, People think it's good because it feels really shitty to lose to, and it feels really fun to win with, but it's not as good as Reasoning Gate Turbo. Warrior. I mean, come on, like it's definitely top tier. Uh, it's the best aggro deck in the format. It um, has the one of the best spells outside of Trinity in the format. It has a huge toolbox of some of the best normal summons in the format. You can very easily slot in the best trap in the format, which is Solemn, no questions asked. So, yeah, I mean, it's just really good. The speed at which this deck can just end games versus unrefined list or more experimental stuff like all this junk down here is just crazy. Um, and it's specifically designed to beat Chaos Turbo, which we'll see where that ends up on the list too. So this is next is Ritual Chaos. I think this deck is very underrated. This is probably going to end up at the bottom of. Let's put it at the top of B tier. We'll go through this at the end and see if anything changes. But this deck is good. I've played with this, and having like a pseudo gadget-ish engine. It's not gadget because you don't get like another monster to summon, but like just getting plus ones from a normal summon is really good. I think people underappreciate how much better normal summoning something is in this format than it is setting it. Um, of course, all the best monsters are sets. Magician of Faith and Gravekeeper Spy, but you do have to take risk to resolve those effects. This not so much. Plus, you can, with Manju, like flip it with Tsukiyomi and reuse it. Um, you can poke with it. If you already, well, since you already plussed one with it, like any removal that's used on it really sucks for your opponent. You can attack with it immediately. Like it's pretty good. Plus is really obvious. When you normal summon this and you search a relinquish, that's a light and a dark, and it fuels your discard engine, which you should be running alongside of this. I don't think Zork is the right choice, by the way. This again isn't a thumbnail that I created, but relinquished is going to be summoned way more easily. You have Serpent in the deck. Anything that's a level 1 can be pitched. Uh, another relinquish can be pitched. It's just like Zork. You're not gonna need to summon Zork. Like you're gonna need to summon relinquished, and you're going to need to probably take a face down that you get a read on as a Magician of Faith when you don't have Nobleman or a Mind Con. Um, Zork is too high of a cost. Like if Zork were 1 star, sure, but like it's obviously not. So you can't afford to be paying the cost for Zork, which in my opinion is just way too high of a cost. So relinquished it is. It's just way better. You can slow games down a lot. It's a mini thousandized. So yeah, it's good. I was surprised when I played the deck how often I was summoning relinquished and being happy that I summoned it. Zombies. I actually have never played this deck. Watched a little gameplay. We'll put him at the top of C. Alefia has been playing this deck a little bit. Um, I just don't think this deck has enough bomb cards. Like, yeah, like Pyramid Turtle into Ryukaki's good. Like, Book of Life's a pretty cool card. But, like, it doesn't really do anything unfair. Pretty much every other deck, like, has Chaos, which is unfair. Like, this has, like, Stein and Reasoning and Monster Gate. Same with this. Like, this can abuse jars. And I wouldn't say it's unfair, but like the Ojama trio, like Yakugi Panda combo is good. Like this is like unfair interaction dot deck. Like that's why it's good. So like if your deck doesn't do anything that's like totally unfair, you're probably not gonna win. Like I guess you could say Return from the Different Dimension is unfair, but it's a deserved unfair. Like it takes a lot of time to set up. Um, this is inconsistent but unfair. Like if you're running Stein, that could be unfair, but that's a multiple card combo, like with Cold Wave Stein, like a last or like last will or whatever it is. I don't know. Um, oh, this is we already have that. We're gonna move this out. So this is flip control. Um, well, trap flip control. It's basically just a watered down version of um, what's called Chaos Turbo. This deck is not bad. It really is not bad. The thing is, Mask of Darkness is weaker, and sometimes you have to sub out stuff like spies or Decoiches, and those stats do matter a whole lot more. Like if you're running a whole deck just full of ninnies, it's just so much harder to win. Like yeah, you can recycle solemns and like your powerful trap cards, but um, you just need more beef. I don't think there's really anything else to say about it. It's not a bad deck though. Like I really do think like if for whatever reason like on opposite day like everyone that was running Chaos Turbo like played this deck, like it would do a lot better than people think. It would probably win the tournament like if like 50% of the representation was that deck because it's good and potent. It's just not as good as Chaos Turbo. Chaos Control, this deck's good. I don't think there's any question that it's A tier. I think it needs to be teched out a little bit more. I think people anchor a little bit too much on Goat's meta because that is, one of the core engines of the deck. It's good versus Warrior, but um, it needs some work. I'm gonna put it above Cat though. And here, I'm actually happy with this ranking. I think, yeah, this is correct. Yeah, so like again, I'm ranking these within the tiers. So I think the top of A is Reasoning Gate Turbo, so on and so forth. I'm gonna piss some people off. Goat Control. It's a B tier deck, and I don't even think it's as good as Ritual Chaos. Um, I don't know what the fuck most Goat Control players are on, but if you look at some of these lists, like I don't know if they're on like crack or something, but like they just look awful. They just look like they picked their favorite cards out of 2005 and just made a deck with them. Um, so yeah, like they need to put in some work. I don't know if it's just like, look, if you want to have fun with a deck, like that's totally fine. But like some of the decks that I see people trying to win with are just like, I have no clue what you're doing. I think a good goat control deck is going to look a whole lot more like chaos control than its former self of just goat control. This deck is more or less a relic of its time um, in a very slow control heavy meta, and that flies when the meta is already slow and control heavy. When the meta is faster, and there's an alternative which is um, Chaos Turbo, this deck's just going to get left in the dust. Sorry to say it. I think, and this goes depending on how they're built, these can be similar, like Chaos Control and Goat Control. I think both of these decks, if they want success, because they have a natural advantage on Warrior, need to very seriously consider how they're going to win against Turbo. And I don't know if that means like main decked like techs, like I don't know, a Kaiku and Mind Control. I did play a Chaos Turbo list that had both of those main decked, and I basically made it so I didn't have to set as much. But the hard part is if you forego setting and you want to break their noblements, you're foregoing things like Spies and Magician of Faiths, which are just the most powerful cards that you can set. So yeah, I don't know. Somebody smarter than me is going to have to figure out how to tech these to beat Chaos Turbo, and that is going to be nice because they have a natural advantage against Warrior. Recruiter Chaos. This deck's not good. Um, it's not. No, it's definitely not there. I think just because it's to play Chaos and like swaps can be really good. I think it's better than Monarch. I think the ability for Monarch to move up a tier is higher than this deck. I think this will be a C tier deck for a long time. I just don't foresee any broken interactions making this deck really any better. Um, if like you could, I think you could take this to a locals and win, but again, it just doesn't do anything unfair. Like Tomato and Shining Angel swap, that's a good play, but is it really unfair? I would argue no. Plus these are susceptible to chaos or like any removal that is prevalent. Like they can spin it back to your deck with Wing Blast, Forgeki breaks everywhere, Warriors running Sakus. Like to commit a monster to your deck, like it kind of needs to do something really good. I just said that like a million times, but like Pyramid Turtles, like the payoff's way higher. Magician of Faith, the payoff's way higher. Gravekeeper Spy, the payoff's way higher. Warriors normal summons can beat your face in and beat over everything and get pluses just by attacking. Um, the Shining Angel and Mystic Tomato Toolbox doesn't really do anything. It just recruits. Oh look, Chaos Turbo. It's number one. Like this is the best deck in the format. It is the most forgiving uh, deck. It is the um, lowest skill or highest skill floor deck. So even bad players can win with this deck quite frequently. Um, so yeah, it's really good. This is the deck that beats it. So it's an S tier. Uh, but this deck's just really fast. I mean, everything it plays has a very difficult time minusing. It doesn't brick that much. Um, it gets to abuse Trinity the most. It's the most resilient to Trinity. Um, yeah. So what's kind of funny, and this is more the meta discussion deck or list or video that I had out. Sorry, it's a little bit late, but a few weeks ago. But these decks are just focusing on each other, and that's kind of why I've been thinking like this tier of stuff. Probably these three, like Reasoning Gate, Burn, and Cat, could very easily come in the meta and just start like chopping heads off. And I think that also goes for Earth Aggro. This deck's good. It's really good. I'm surprised how well it plays, and I'm surprised how many games you can win with this deck. I'm also surprised how good the Giant Rat engine is. And I know I just got done shitting on Tomato and Shining Angel, but Rat, at least, like this can be used a lot more aggressively. Like this is designed to be played as in a control deck. Like you can crash rats and like take care of stuff and like bring out injection fairy lilies and like it feeds your gigantes. I don't know what Gaia Power is doing here, but like this deck is damn good. And a few developments with it, like people adding dust shoots to the main. Um, I like that a lot because having hand knowledge with an aggro deck like this that is going to end the game by the time you basically see all the cards in the hand anyway is so powerful. I really like that innovation, and it forgoes stuff like Sakuretsu armor, which is like if you're getting attacked, you're probably gonna like lose anyway. Like what are you really afraid of, like with them attacking? Like, yeah, you want to run like Mirror Force and stuff, but if you're on your heels, like with one normal summon per turn, and like your special summon being a Gigantes, like are you really gonna be able to get back in that game? Probably not. So that's really the list. This I don't think is even seeing play anymore. Like, what's this, Archfiends or something? Like, all this other stuff is just one-off junk. Um, we'll do a quick run through of like if anything within tiers I think needs changes. I think this is undisputed number one, number two within A tier. Um, based on tournament results, maybe this isn't number one within A tier, but I think the ability for this to be number one in A tier is correct. I think Burn second. Uh, with some improvements and innovation with this, as well as some maybe good techs that are main decked as opposed to sided. I think this deck um, is definitely A tier chaos control. Um, you have a pretty good uh, RGT matchup too. You have a pretty good Earth aggro matchup. You have a good warrior matchup. I think you just need to solve for Chaos Turbo. Whether or not that's mained like Minecons or Kaiku, I'm really not sure. Um, this, yep, I think this all looks pretty correct. I mean, actually, I'm not sure. I haven't played much Cat really. I think this deck, like, just because it can cheese wins and has like just the ability to main deck a Stein, it just has to be better than Earth Aggro at this point. Yeah, we're switching this. I think this. I don't think Steingate's really going to be a deck any longer. In fact, this could probably move down a tier. I think these types of builds, they're just too glass cannon. We're moving it down a tier. Zombies has potential. I just don't think it does anything unfair enough. This deck's too slow. Probably too slow, too bricky, way too slow, way too inconsistent. Yes, I'm happy with the tier list. Let me know what you guys think if you disagree with anything, or if there are any decks I missed. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything really prevalent in the meta that I've missed. But yeah, I'm not doing this shit. Like, this is way too much. So for now, thanks for watching.